We have several councillors on Zoom. Sorry, we do have an apology. Councillor McDonald, McDonald, I move the apology. Seconded, Councillor Winters. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. There is no public forum. There are no new items on the agenda. The order of business has been circulated. Don't think there are any conflicts of interest. No, thank you. So that moves us through to our schedule of speakers. So our first speaker is Steve Osborne. We've got Mr. Osborne with us. Mr. Osborne, are you with us?
Can you hear me now?
Just, can you speak again, please?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we'll just give you a bit more volume. Right, welcome, and the floor is now yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning. In my opinion, the proposed fees and their structures have been poorly apportioned. A fee is an extension of our rates. Therefore, I presume that the costs have been apportioned to sectors based on their perceived ability to pay. Private boards for no commercial gain should therefore be minimal as cost, as businesses can claim the expense and GST back where the obviously the private person can't. In my case, I've had 3 inspections in 10 years, and the other ones have been by a phone. While I accept that there is, it is right that you keep a control of the boards that are there. I think that the apportioning of the cost should be re-looked at. I'd like to point out 2 areas where you're claiming above rates for the administration of these items. I can point an example where you've got buses running from Wakatani and Katikati to Homai Polytech during the school holidays with no customers, which is ludicrous. You have another example where you've built a bund along a walkway by a mokoroa, a soft bund, despite being repeatedly told that a solid rock bund is necessary. In less than 12 months, the soft bund, which really only replaced another soft bund which was called the shore, this has been washed away, and now they're going to redo it with a rock bund. So to claim admin fees for one area and then waste money extremely in other areas is, I believe, very unfortunate. So I'm only keeping this brief. I would like to just get you to reconsider the apportioning of the fees that you propose to charge, and take in consideration that businesses and private users should be treated. The weighting should be more on the business side than the private side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Osborne. Councillors, any questions that you would like to pose in terms of further explanation, answer to some of the issues that are being raised? It's not a debate, remind you. Appears not. So thank you, Mr. Osborne, for again, once again, for taking the time to respond to this call for submissions. It's appreciated. I know from time to time members of the public think we receive these, we don't do anything about it, but we do take note of what those submissions are, even though a final outcome may not meet the wishes of all submitters. So thank you once again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have Whitiora McLeod with us?
No, he's not right there.
Okay. Arthur Flintoff. Are you with us, Arthur? Morning, Arthur. Nice to see you again.
It's good to hear. Shall I start?
You've got a submission, Arthur, on behalf of Mangatawa 13B2B, Ahu Whenua Trust.
Aye.
Thank you.
Kia ora tātou. I am chair on a number of Maori land trusts in the southern area of Tauranga Moana, and I make my submission on behalf of all land blocks zoned rural and subject to the rapid increasing rates as the urban sprawl bears down on us and councils place pressures upon us to release land to help meet the region's housing and infrastructure needs. Maori land is still what it has always been for us. It has not changed. Infrastructure that is necessary for social and economic prosperity is minimal in our communities. There's no broadband. We still draw water from our bores and sewages into septic tanks and soakholes. It once took me 5 minutes to go to Papua Plaza, but the upgrade of the State Highway 2 means I now have to travel north 5 kilometres to U-turn to go south. A gas pipeline runs through our lands, but we have no access to that. The issues for Maori communities are still the same. The ability to influence priorities of council spending still eludes most, if not all, Maori communities such as mine. On some blocks, we are still organising its governance structures that will permit us to access the resources to develop our lands in a way in accordance to our values. There is no Maori land block in this country that does not aspire to be better and prosper. Maori land is different and must be treated with greater equity. I'd like to remind you that when the colonialists set up the Native Land Acts in 1862 and 1865, the Act was repeatedly amended and reenacted, that the original foundation of the land tenure structure had become lost, and it caused nothing but conflict and confusion for Maori of that time who were accustomed to collective responsibility for the whenua. That is still the case today. By 1882, the Native Lands Ratings Act introduced rates on Maori lands. These were much higher than the rates on European-owned land or what Europeans paid on their land. The rates were difficult for Maori to pay. When rates were not paid, the land was seized by local authorities. By the 1904, the Native Ratings Act stated defaulters might find their land compulsory vested in land boards, which could lease the land to pay off the debt. The mouthpiece of these local authorities, of course, were Pākehā rural settlers who capitalised off Maori land under the pretext of helping Maori pay their debts. The Town Planning Act in 1926 zoned Maori land as rural on the basis that Maori traditionally practiced agriculture. There was huge effort to politicise the Maori rates arrears. Farmers' organisations aggressively lobbying the government to confiscate land that were in arrears and to place it on the market. A feat the government of that day knew it was difficult to achieve. By 1928, the politicising of rates on Maori land led to the chief clerk of the Native Department declaring native land shall be liable for rates in the same manner as if it were European land, exempting, of course, customary land in Urupa. In 1933, the national government set up the Native Rating Committee to look into Maori complaints about the lack of council services. Their 3-page report was critical of Maori's rating policy was designed that Maori did not pay their fair share of the rating burden. Up until 1944, ratepayers who defaulted on their rates were not permitted to vote in county elections, a rule that often further disempowered Maori landowners. See, the real problem has never been that Maori are unwilling to pay rates. Rather, the real problem is the complex system of the Maori land tenure itself and the inconsistent policies underpinning it. I don't want to start down the path of how Maori would denied access to seeds, government subsidies, resources, even bank loans because Maori freehold land was considered inalienable. Although it is tempting to go on further about the inequities Maori have endured just in the area of rates, I shall leave that for the day a Waitangi Tribunal investigation is undertaken on the subject. Maori freehold land is a category of land that arises from the Tūru Whenua Maori Act 1993, an act totally separate from all other acts concerning land. Furthermore, that Maori freehold land has its own court and register. The history of politics I've briefly touched on still consider Maori freehold land as vested land, just as any other land. Maori land is not like any other land. Land is considered a taonga tukuihu. In European translation, it is viewed as an heirloom or inheritance, but in Maori, there is a special significance that differs Maori land from how colonial settlers view this land. For us, the land carries with it over 1,000 years of our history. And through the generations, we have established an intimate knowledge of this place and how to live on it in a sustainable manner. This understanding and right way of being with the land has been embedded in our culture and way of being, not just with the environment, but also with one another. Land is our community life. It tells us where we come from, who we are, and the importance of knowing and behaving accordingly. We call the land whenua which also means placenta, the organ that provides oxygen and nutrients, the necessities for life. As one commentator put it, our whenua embodies the relational framework about who we are, how we are connected, and the building blocks about how we thrive and grow as a whānau, hapu, and as an iwi going forward. Rating on Maori land is where tax law and Maori land law meet. Maori land is inalienable, so unlike other lands in the freehold title system, it has no value. Rates, therefore, are simply a tax mandated by law, payable by property owners to local government. Customary land reservations or heritage land cannot be considered for rate because they are not subject to Torrens land registration transfer system. Councils undertake ratings valuations of all properties within their areas at least every 3 years. We are expected to apply every year for remission. Applications for remission ought to be once every 3 years. I submit that Maori freehold land should not be valued in the same manner as other lands because it is not like other lands. Following the land confiscation, the colonialists retained possession of the most valuable land and returned the poorer quality land to Maori, which today we are beginning to restore our mana motahaki Osborne. Finally, I make this submission with the reminder of your obligation to the Local Government Rating of Whenua Maori Amendment Act 2021 that amended 2002 Local Government Ratings Act and seeks to end a rating system that is not fit for Maori and had resulted in the underdevelopment of our lands. Section 50 of the Act provides for the remission of the rates of Maori freehold land under development, a development that facilitates the return of its owners to live upon the land gifted to us from our tupuna for generations, for future generations, as it was always intended. Ka nui te mihi kia koutou mō taringa mō me o wā, kia ora koutou katoa.
Kia ora, Arthur. Thank you for that submission, councillors. Any questions to Mr. Flintoff and Councillor White?
Tēnā koe te rangatira mō te whakaaro mō te kōrero kia mātou I tēnei rā. Ko te taru White ahau, e noho mai ana I tēnei pāri te taho o kūrei. Mō reira kei te mihi atu ki a koe. Just listening to your kōrero, Arthur, the issue that you seem to be raising is one of equity or equitable treatment, given not only the history but the current state of Māori land. Is that a fair comment?
Aye, that is correct.
You want to elaborate on any further issues around your sense of equity? Because it is a topical matter, let me put it that way.
We are way behind the ball in being able to develop our lands in a way that's equitable with Europeans, how they develop their lands. And this is often because of policies and the ratings also, because it's like Maori land is different. Like I was saying, that it has its own court, it's a different thing. It should not be rated in the same manner as, or valued in the same manner as other lands. I think the new amendments that have been made to the Rating Act is very good to help assist Maori land to be developed. We're doing a lot of our blocks at the moment. It is a slow process because the owners don't have money. There's no money on the block. Maori have basically leased their land for maize, because that's just an easy one, just to pay rates. The money that comes out of that doesn't go far. It's not enough for us to be able develop our lands in the way that we want to. And I think that when you talk about equity, it's not a case of let's be the same as the Europeans. We want to be able to develop our lands in the manner we want. On Maori lands, many of our boards, corporations and trusts, they divvy up the money to all the owners and descendants regularly. So it's all about stakeholders, not about investors. Oh, I could go on.
Kia ora mo tēnā e taramatira.
With Councillor Nees, Arthur.
Kia ora, Arthur. I note in your submission you're asking for other remissions, full remission on land being cleared of pest plants and restored to a natural healthy state. Remission on for Maori land that does not use city water or sewage utilities, and remission for land subject to flooding. Do you think these are only relevant for Maori land or should be applied for other types of land?
I speak only for Maori land. I think regarding other lands, I guess that's up to you guys to decide on, but I'm concerned that you remember the pest plants that we have on our land. We didn't bring these pest plants in, but we are subject to be fined for these pest plants being on our lands. We get concerned that if we clear the pest plants, it changes our rates and is considered now being developed. We simply just want to get rid of the pest plants. A lot of our land also, you got to remember that, like I stated, is it's second-rate land. We bought on wetlands and stuff like that, which is quite common for flooding to occur around us. Or the good land, like I said, was taken. So much of Maori land is not in land that is easy to manage.
Okay, thank you, Arthur, for your submission, not only on behalf of Mangatawa, but obviously those other trusts that you provide services to. You're taking time to make a submission. It's really appreciated.
Got it.
Right. Right, councillors, we have a bit of a dearth of submitters. So until such time as we have someone fronting on the Zoom module, we will just take a small recess.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Chair? Can I ask a question to our CFO? Because Arthur talked about how we value Maori land. My understanding is we do, or whoever values land at the 3-year revaluation process, Maori land is valued differently. Is that correct from our CFO?
Good morning, councillors. Yes, so Maori land will be revalued in relation to the state of that land under council's policies, and valued in accordance with that process. So if the policy or if there's a sample of Maori land that's been deemed unproductive under the various criteria of the policy, that's communicated to the valuers, and they follow that approach in that regard.
But my understanding is Maori land is valued differently because it can never be sold. Is that?
In terms of the practical ownership models for Maori freehold land, yes, it is quite difficult to sell because of the multiple owned Maori ownership model. But having said that, the valuers do factor that into their criteria under the capital value model.
That's what I wanted.
I think the short answer to your question, you have to help me, Councillor White. What was the High Court case on that big Māori block of land between Mangatu block? There was a court ruling in terms of valuation of Maori land taken by Mangatu block, which is between east of Tikaraka. Yeah. Mr. Brunning.
Yes, thank you. Just regarding Mr. Osborne's submission, can staff clarify around the question around the Mokoroa golf course and the works that were done on the foreshore there? I don't believe our council paid for those works. I think we probably gave the consent, but not the, we didn't construct that or pay for it. Just seeking clarification.
Good morning, Councillor Brunning. I will follow up on that, but my understanding is similar to yours, but I'll come back to you with firm comment on that. And also on the other comment that was made, just to note that the bus services that Mr Osborne was talking about was the bus services contracted by the University of Waikato and Te Ohomai, and they run at different times to the school holidays.
And can I make one further clarification, Mr Chair? Mr Osborne, if you're still online, is this, because we don't know the details, your address or anything like that, is this Mr Steve Osborne, motel owner in Rotorua?
Sorry, can you
the
please,
same person?
can you please repeat that?
Hi, yes, Steve, it's Kevin Winters here. I'm just wanting to clarify who you are. Is this Steve Osborne, the motel owner in Rotorua? Because I can't see you. I just need you to clarify, please.
Yes, it certainly is me, Kevin.
Kia ora. Morning, sir.
Thank you.
Right, thank you, councillors. If you just give us time, we are short of submissives, but we have some. And I see Anne Pankhurst was waiting in the waiting room. Anne, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
I know you're not. Thanks for joining us so early.
It's okay.
Would you be prepared to make your submission on behalf of Tauranga Chamber of Business Chambers at the moment?
I certainly am.
Thank you very much. The floor's now yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, councillors. I'm assuming that you've read our submission, and that therefore I won't go over all the detail and certainly won't bore you and read it all. I think for us the most important part is potentially around the whole quayside investment aspect, and one of our concerns, as you can read there, is the difference between the 33 million that you receive as a dividend and the 29 million that you take as a rate in a general rate income, and that there is a huge reliance therefore on that subsidy from quayside. So I think our decision sort actually explains what our position in that. I won't go over all the details and I'll leave it to you to ask me questions, but also the perception that is happening more and more and that we are hearing more and more is the simmering discontent with the port. Whilst we are hugely supportive and completely agree with the port and its importance to the region, there is a simmering discontent that can be applied to the social licence. So part of our thinking is that potentially can you use some of your dividend or some of that benefit that you as a council receive from that quayside to actually help the port in their social licence. That is only going to grow as the port does. We've heard a particularly interesting presentation from Leonard Sampson 2 weeks ago at a city leaders lunch, and the potential is huge, what it is doing is huge, but the upside is that that's wonderful, the downside is the social licence is running out. So we would like to see some investment go back into the community, and that can be through those larger investments such as the domain and other particular amenity that will benefit all of the community. Then the Bay of Connections is our next aspect on there. I think that is pretty clear what we've said there and our concerns, but one of our decisions is that you potentially review what you're doing with Bay of Connections, but the money that you spend on it might be better given to the local economic development agencies for specific projects that you can both partner with and use that money more effectively. And the last is the public transport, and I think that's around sitting with what appears to be in the public domain as a leadership issue. Nobody wants the bad bits, everyone wants the good bits, and it might be quite good to actually move it into a position where you are seen as a cohesive unit, that actually if the one thing we need in the city is public transport and the support of it, that you all do it together and that it is well supported. So that's very briefly what I've summarised what we've said, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Anne. And could I compliment you and the Business Chamber for the quality and the well thought out submission that you've put into this on those three aspects that you've raised. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Councillors, submissions open for any further items that you would like further explanation around in terms of the submission. Councillor Nees.
Thank you, Anne, good to see you.
Thank you.
I just wonder if you could give us some feedback as to what you think the performance of Bay Connections is.
Just that it doesn't appear to have any grunt or relevance. It's actually working on some pretty minor projects or aspects that is in a city in a region that is growing incredibly quickly. Like we heard from the Whakatane District Council last night, their growth is phenomenal, that you must be aware of as well. And that the need for economic development agencies to be providing the support and that capacity building, would the 500,000 be better spent there rather than particularly within the regional council with what is no longer looks like you are delivering on the original Bay of Connections platform, which in the framework, years ago it was a really valuable thing. It brought together the region in an economic development framework. It really worked, but it seems to have run its course. That's probably what we're saying.
Councillor Winters.
Good morning, Ian. Kevin Winters here. Ian, on page 37, you talk about Quayside having 2 years of liquidity
Yes.
for the dividend from the port. How many years do you think we should have up our sleeve in terms of dividend to minimise that risk that you talk about?
I don't think it's whether or not you should have more liquidity. It's about saying that you have got it there, that you need to be aware that there is a potential risk that your dividend drops. Potentially saying 3 to 5 might be quite good, but that does mean that you're then sitting on a humongous amount of cash that could be better used somewhere else in the region or somewhere else in the for amenity or whatever. I think the issue is that you are sitting on a lot of liquidity, that you are sitting with a lot of money tucked up there, and is there better ways to use that? And we all know the cost of money, particularly to the city. I know that it's very city-centric, but it is a very expensive, growth is an extremely expensive benefit, and having money sitting aside is a bit of a risk. But I guess it actually speaks, rather than how much you have set aside, is should you be subsidising the rates as much as you are? And there has been talk, and there is always political caution around this. And the business community is starting to say, remove the subsidy or some of the subsidy and invest in the region.
Thank you.
Councillor White.
Tēnā koe Anne, Te Taru White here, Akuta representatives, nice to meet you, albeit online. Look, I know that you speak on behalf of the Tauranga Business Chamber, and of course you've got the other chambers in Rotorua and other areas. I'm assuming you talk together at some point, and do you have a view about, whether there's a similar perspective around social license and around the issues that you have raised in this particular paper? I'm just trying to get a sense of regional view, albeit that you're speaking on behalf of the chamber.
Yes, I appreciate the regional aspect of the regional council. We speak on behalf of our own business community, and largely that is because we're directly on a daily basis meshed into the transport issues and the issues of growth here in the Bay. We do talk to the other chambers a lot. We work closely with them. And one of the places that we work really closely is called the Regional Business Partnership. So we have a very close working relationship with them, but this is our opinion. So I would have to say that I'm sure they may have their own views of it, but we're not representing, in this case, a regional chamber view.
Right, and we have several councillors on Zoom, so I've got through at the moment. We'll go firstly to Councillor Von Duddleson.
Yeah, thank you for your considered submission, Anne. A lot of empathy there with me. Just let's talk about passenger transport and your desire for us to work more collaboratively together and in a coordinated manner. Just to say that we recognise that as a regional council, and as such, at the end of last year, established a joint PT committee specifically for Tauranga transport rather than the Western Bay and others, so that recognising that it is such a huge bill, the Tauranga public transport, for our ratepayers, and it is 100% targeted rate, and that's something that I question, but that's for another day. What I'm looking for is, I presume you recognise that we have set this committee up. It is a small joint committee of 2 regional councillors and 2 commissioners only, and the idea of actually getting staff at both organisations to think singularly rather than siloed. And I have to say it's been a struggle to get started, but it is starting to work. My question to you is are you looking for something further? Is there something specific that you're looking for there? Can you help me? Because I think you're in a good area.
Thank you. The business chamber would say that public transport is critical and that we need to grow it. What is concerning is, and I think it's reassuring, Andrew, to hear that you're working together and that you're trying to move this forward together. It's that kind of thought that when the bad stuff happens, e.g. the bus stops, everyone's ducking for cover rather than collectively having a statement that says we've got this, that we're managing this, that we are seen to be working together, not as a part. So, it's not whether or not you should have an opinion, but when you do see articles in the newspaper where one party's asked and the other is not responding, could that, as a simple example, come out of that committee where it looks like both councils have this, that you're both working in the same space to achieve the same outcomes, rather than, I don't want to know about it, it's their problem. That's a little bit of the public perception. And if that committee is set up to work together, then they make the public statement, not the separate councils. It isn't, our public transport is, if you look on Facebook, God forbid, does come under a lot of attack about the buses are empty, etc., etc. But we would all agree that we need public transport. We need it to work. Let's make sure that we're doing the best that we can, I guess, is what I would suggest.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Councillor Brunning.
Yes, thanks, and very good submission. Can I just ask, are you going to make the same submission, especially on passenger transport, to Tauranga City Commissioners and Western Bay District Council?
Yes, we did last year, but not necessarily to Western Bay, but yes, we did. And we're very vociferous in our language around it. Whilst supporting it, we do want it to be seen to be a collaborative approach to public transport to get a good outcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have Councillor Thurston.
Yeah, Anne Weil, Thurston from Rotorua here. Just doing a bit of a deep dive into your comments on behalf of the Chamber re reported Tauranga's social licence. the sweeping statement that there is simmering discontent amongst Tauranga residents, etc., who are questioning whether the Port of Tauranga should be allowed to continue its long-term growth trajectory. Is that comment based on surveys that you've undertaken as part of the chamber, or is that a view that's held by the majority, if not all, the chamber members or the board of the chamber? Can you just elaborate a little bit more, please?
Okay, I guess what you're asking is where has this information come from? I would say it's anecdotal. It is, yes, it is amongst our members. Before I continue, I want to absolutely state that we support the port and what it does enormously. It's just now got to recognise that it consumes a lot of our roads. It consumes a lot of our space. It is in a growth mode, which we're 100% want to support. For iwi, it is now going into the ocean. So there is a whole lot of things that for it to grow, it needs to do, but it needs to bring the community with it. So what we're starting to hear is that the community is not feeling supported by the port. How they do that and how Quayside do that it will be the difference between a lot of support for the port and a growing discontent that they are actually, like Pac-Man, consuming our region and our environment and not necessarily giving back to those things. So we do see the port do a lot of work around the environment, but is there stuff that can go to the wider community that they see and support this huge asset that the region has?
All right, thank you, Anne. Councillor Crosby.
Good morning, Anne. Good to see you. Thank you for your submission.
Thank you.
In speaking to it, you raised the issue that we should be considering shifting away from a complete subsidy of rates to investment into the region through the dividend. Have you got any ideas in terms of what that investment could look like?
Well, yes, I think it is about looking at the social amenity that happens. Like, it is well known that Quayside has $1 billion worth of assets. That is a phenomenal powerhouse that sits in this region. And whilst you can ask and you can try and see what this Quayside does, it's actually very hard to pin something constructive and visible. Yes, it's Rangiuru, but that seems to be a slow burning. It was around since I was sitting in your seats, and it still hasn't really taken off. So it's about saying, here's a humongous asset or wealth that sits there, and it's not necessarily doing much for the community. So some kind of amenity support across the region. I'm not just suggesting the city, but across the region. But let's see some of that unlocked into maybe housing, maybe supporting a housing project. Yes, it's great. And I do understand that Quayside needs to show its shareholders / yourselves in the port a dividend, but some of that can be a social dividend. Some of that can give back into other areas that aren't just about getting a return on investment. The other thing I'd like to say about the subsidising the rates is that I'm not 100% sure that the community actually understand the value of the regional council because they are not paying for it. And we all know that when you pay for something, you start to value it. You actually start to understand what you're getting for your money. While you're subsidising it, and it is a relatively low rate, people just wonder what does the regional council do for us? Why are they there? They look after the waterways. But regional council does an amazing job, and you need to be valued for that. The way that you get value is somebody pays for it and asks the questions. So that for me has always been a bit of a thing about the subsidy, is that it is actually disguising the value of the regional council.
Right. Thank you.
That was my
political
statement.
That was. Thank you, Anne, for your submission into the chamber. And my closing comment would be the value of the port and Quayside, especially the port, is the market cap. You only sell these things once, And secondly, don't forget about the economic multiplier of the activity that takes place in the wider region as a result of those investments. So thank you for your submission. Councillors, I need to move on to John Turner. Are you with us? You are. Sorry for the delay, John. We had a few no shows, so I had to change the agenda around. Please come up, take a seat. And I see that we have Jess Brennan with us, or she was. Jess, if you can just wait in the waiting room, we'll deal with John, then we'll come through to yourself. Welcome, Mr. Turner.
Thank you. Thank you. I was directed to come here, even though my resource consent provides for the consent to be reviewed each year at 2 different times, and I've been asking for 10 years to have it reviewed and been consistently steered away from that, and told either leave things as they are or give up your consent, which, because we have $50,000 and many hours invested in what we've accomplished so far, we've been very reluctant to do that. But anyway, it might seem spurious that I'm here for that particular purpose, but here I am. And I did read through the 3 booklets of council policy for this particular hearing, and I will have some comments about that. So I've emailed the BOPRC fees and charges to the BOPRC fees and charges submissions documenting the trying circumstances which my wife and I have been subjected to for the past 15 years in regard to our geothermal bore and related consented activity. We have and still face difficult financial circumstances wherein we have been unable to move our activity forward or back. Can't move it forward because our contacts at the council have not been willing to work with us to make the best of the marginal situation of our activity. And we can't move back because because we have invested considerable funds and work in establishing the bore and related infrastructure, and hate to consider abandoning this. And that infrastructure consists of the following. There's 100 meters of stainless steel pipe down the bore connected which constitutes a downhole heat exchanger. That's connected by 80 meters of undergrounded shark bite hydronic tubing, which is the most modern plastic tubing that's designed for geothermal heat, that is lagged with polyurethane. It's underground in 110 millimeter pipes, which lead this 80 meters to our utility room, and from there to our plunge pool, which plunge pool was built in 2011, but it's never been filled because we did not get the hot water from our bore to fill it, and we've been unable to get the clearance from the council so that we can consider, in terms of the economics, buying the hot water heat pump, stainless steel, 350 liter tank to act as a buffer tank, and also we need a fan coil and some radiators that would complete our system. It's still a considerable investment. Easily we could spend $50,000 on it if we tried to do it here, because that heat pump alone will cost you $30,000. But we could get the same heat pump, in fact, a better heat pump from Canada for $5,000 US. So this reticulation is also connected to locations where we intend to install the heat pump, which will raise the 30 centigrade intake water to 70 C. Our bore, if you let it run for an hour and you measure the temperature at the bore, is 34 degrees. And so after it goes through this 80 meters of reticulation, it's 30 C at the point at which our hot water heat pump would be installed. And in one pass, it would raise that to 70 C, which would let us just continuously run our city water, which is replenishing what we take out, at the rate that permits, which is about 30 liters per minute, into our 3 cubic meter plunge pool and fill it up, or use it for whatever purposes. We can feed into our hot water cylinder. We can do a lot of things that would save energy and which should help to amortize the costs of our system over, say, 15 years. However, the fees alone at this point take all of that savings away, and there's nothing there. And like I say, in that situation, we can't go forward, we can't go back. All of this is existing except for the heat pump, fan coil, the buffer tank, and the radiators, all of it. So while I did much of this work, we hired Wallace Geothermal Plumbers of Rotorua to install the lines and connect the downhole exchanger to our city water supply, and that was a considerable expense in itself. These geothermal plumbers, they don't work cheap, and there's 3 of them come out and all work together, and it's a huge bill. But we are not happy to give up our efforts and investment as a loss, which is what we have been advised to do. In my submissions, you can see again and again, I was told this as an alternative to continuing to pay for the consent, which does not fit our operation. We're classified as on the Rotorua field, and we're not on the Rotorua field. We're 10 kilometers from the Rotorua field. And these things render our consent uneconomical. Yet, as the submitted evidence shows, we have not seen a resolution to this situation despite 10 years of trying. We now wish to complete with further significant investments a system for central heating and cooling our home and an efficient source of hot water to fill our plunge pool and preheat our domestic hot water. We are seeking some relief from the BOPRC according to the following elements of statute. The first is Section 21 of the RMA, which says every person who carries out functions, powers, and duties is required to do so, and for which no time limits are prescribed, shall do so as promptly as reasonable in the circumstances. I don't think it's been prompt or forthcoming to just ignore the fact that our consent says right there, you can have this thing updated at any time. Just because I, in the process of renovating our home, which is totally everything, have put this away and only found it about a month ago. It was gone for 10 years and I didn't know this information. So then we move on to Section 35, duty to gather information, monitor, and keep records. Every local authority shall monitor the efficiency and effectiveness of processes used by the local authority in exercising its powers or performing its functions or duties, including matters such as timeliness, cost, and the overall satisfaction of those persons in respect to whom the powers, functions, or duties are exercised or performed, and take appropriate action having regard to the methods available to it under this act where this is shown to be necessary. I think they could have gotten some pointers from us to say, here, come on, you need to do something. Every local authority shall keep available information which is relevant to the administration plans and monitoring of resource consents to enable the public to participate effectively under this act. And while I have a 2021 database which shows all the bores and Rotoruas, if I look at that link, try to search the link, it says this is no longer available, and I see no such information anymore. I don't know whether it's been totally withdrawn or not, but even as it stood, it did not show. It shows what each particular activity is classified as, and that shows that something like the Eastgate bore, which takes 170 cubic meters a day of 90-degree water out of the ground, is classified as minor effect of the activity, and therefore was never notified. And ours is classed the same. The Polynesian Spa and the Millennium Hotel are all classed the same. They're all minor. And so I can't see that their fees are substantially higher than ours are. I doubt it. And I would like to see those fees. And I anticipate that my answer would be that under Section 42, we're not allowed to do that because we have to, this is commercially sensitive. It's not that, it says if that's reasonable, so to speak. And I say that's not reasonable because other consent users should be look at what each other pay and see, hey, is this fair to me? As it is, nobody has the ability to do that, as far as I can see, because I do not see that information published, and it's a duty here, notwithstanding Section 42.
So Mr. Turner.
Yeah.
Can I just note that your submission in terms that we're dealing with today was comprehensive. There's 3.5 pages of stuff there.
Yes.
One of your last paragraphs is you're asking and you'd appreciate any guidance the council can offer in regard to the renewal of your consent.
Yep.
So that's been circulated to all councillors, as has the very detailed paper trail of your correspondence with this organisation over a number of years. So councillors have read all this. And I think in the interest of time and other people waiting in the waiting room, that we can deal with questions, and then I'll ask the Chief Executive to respond in terms of what staff's response will be in terms of your submission, because you have put a lot of effort into this over a large number of years.
Okay, well, I won't read further legislation to you other than one thing, which is that, 87BB. Activities meeting certain requirements are permitted activities. An activity is a permitted activity if the activity would be permitted activity except for marginal non-compliance with requirements, conditions, and permissions specified in this act. And any adverse effects are no different than they would be in the absence of the marginal non-compliance referred to. Any adverse effects are less than minor, and the consent authority in its discretion decides to notify the person proposing to undertake the activity that the activity is a permitted activity, okay? I think it all comes down to that for us. If we could have that, that would mean that unless there was something, it doesn't mean they can't charge us anymore. It just means we will not be charged as a matter of routine. They're still able to come and inspect our bore and charge us for it. And if there's anything wrong, they can make us pay to have that fixed. So, but what it does, it says if our activity is marginally a permitted activity, which it is, all right? If we look at RMA2, the definitions, it says that geothermal water is has a temperature of 30 degrees Celsius or more. Well, ours is 34 degrees. Now that's a marginal difference. Even low heat.
Mr. Turner, can we deal with the questions? Give councillors the opportunity to answer your concerns, because I said you've.
Well, what questions am I supposed to ask?
Well, I'm just asking councillors need the opportunity to ask questions of your submission, because we do run to a time limit here. So councillors.
Well, how about if I move on to your three booklets, okay?
Mr. Turner, you've had the opportunity to make your submission. I'm now asking you to desist.
Did you make this clear to me that, this is all you have to say? You can't say anything further?
Mr. Turner, I understand all submitters have been advised that they have 5 minutes in terms of the submission. I've given you the latitude.
I wasn't advised that.
Well over 5 minutes.
Nobody advised me that. I had no idea how much time was allotted.
And
I didn't see these people speaking for 5 minutes.
Mr. Turner, the discretion rests with me, and I think in the interest
of
time.
Who are you?
I'm the chairman of the council, Mr. Turner.
The chairman of the board.
Chairman of the council. We're not a corporate entity. So I'll ask councillors if they've got any questions. I said I'll ask the chief executive to respond in terms of your submission. Councillors, any questions for Mr. Turner? It appears not. Chief executive.
Thank you, Chair. And
Mr. Chair,
kindly.
I did have my hand up.
Mr. Von Dadelson, I appreciate you've had your hand up, but in the interest of time, I need to move on. I've asked the chief executive to respond. Thank you.
Mr. Turner kindly emailed me a couple of weeks back and provided me with all this information as well. We've been wanting to meet with Mr. Turner for a number of weeks, and we're going to meet at 11 o'clock today, and Councillor Winters is also joining that meeting. So very pleased to see you here, Mr. Turner, because very keen to meet with you and talk face to face.
Okay. Now, what about, I do have some comments about these three proposals.
I'm sorry, Mr. Turner.
Three booklets. How can I submit those?
I'm sorry, Mr.
Too late
Turner.
now? It's not
The
possible?
chief executive has just responded.
Yeah, I heard that.
And I think that I have given you the latitude and the grace to make a submission well over and above the time allocated. So it's.
And nobody told me that.
I recommend that we now concluded in terms of your submission. So thank you.
Okay, so shut up. You're not going to give me the information, so I'll attempt to find something else.
Thanks for taking the time to come over.
All set and posted down now. I can't do anything more.
Thank you. Do we have Jess Brennan with us?
Good morning. Yes, I'm here.
Right, welcome, Jess. Sorry for the delay.
No, that's no worries at all. Yeah, I do have to jump off in a few minutes, so I'll try and keep it nice and brief. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak to our submissions today. So I'm Jessie Brennan. I'm from Federated Farmers of New Zealand, and yeah, I'm here speaking today on behalf of our Bay of Plenty province and our Rotorua Taupo provincial members. So we have over 1,000 members in the Bay of Plenty region. And Federated Farmers has a long and proud history of representing farmers' interests in policy and advocacy work. So I'm speaking to three of our submissions today, but I'm just going to go through the main points, so feel free to jump in if you have any questions. So in terms of the revenue and financing policy, we were largely supportive of the sustainable homes targeted rate. For the regional infrastructure targeted rate, we wanted some clarification around whether that would just apply to projects that meet the definition of regionally significant infrastructure, or if this would be applied to regional development activity in the long-term plan. In terms of rates remissions, the big questions we had there were around the forestry and bush remission and around whether consideration of areas outside the Rotorua Lakes area have been considered eligible for a remission. We also encourage making that applicable to land parcels of any size. And we also encouraged remissions for QE2 land for that to be extended to significant natural areas under district plans to kind of go with the objective of that remission as well. We also wanted to see a remission for contiguous land titles that are not in common ownership to reflect that some farms may be kind of accumulated over time. A person might purchase neighbours' property, so we wanted to see that farmers can get a remission for that to kind of represent that they do pay their fair share in their rates. And one step further of that would be allowing for non-contiguous land titles, such as, say, a runoff that might be a couple of kilometres down the road from a farmer's main farm. For fees and charges, in terms of change 1 to the fixed charges for plan change 10 consents, we did not agree with that change. We support user pays principle. I think that that time should be charged as and when a compliance charge is needed for those consents. We were quite neutral on the fees and charges increases across the board. We can appreciate that inflation is a pretty big influence on that at the moment. And we also wanted to emphasise that any charges that do go to our members, we would like those to be itemised and quite clear on why there is a charge and detailed in their descriptions. In terms of the waiver for OSEP charges for marae, we wanted to know whether this had been considered for other community services or groups such as churches, and would also appreciate a response as to where the cost would come from to cover such waivers as well. So pretty brief, but if there's any questions, more than happy to answer those, and I've got to jump off in a couple of minutes. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Jess. Could I just compliment you and Federated Farmers on the very good submission. It's well considered, and it's constructive in terms of the way forward. So thanks for posing those questions, which no doubt start. We'll go back to you, councillors. Any questions for Jess representing Federated Farmers? Appears not, Jess. So once again, thank you for your submission, and sorry to hold you up.
No, that's no worries at all. Thank you for your time.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, we have Tom Rutherford on the line. Is Mayor Webber with you, Mr. Rutherford?
Kia ora koutou. So I'm Tom Rutherford from the Western Bay Planning District Council, here with my colleague Corey Stevens as well. Mayor Webber was going to be here this morning, but unfortunately he is unwell and not able to attend, so he sends his apologies. But he has asked that we come and provide a verbal submission to the submission that we submitted relating to the Regional Council's rates remissions policy. And so Corey's going to speak around some of the key points that we made a submission on.
Thank you, Tom. Welcome, Corey.
I just wanted to first off say thank you to the Regional Council for allowing us to submit late on this one. It just took us a little while to pull it together once we knew that it was up for consultation. The main point that we want to reinforce overall is that the proposed policy isn't consistent with the Western Bay Planning District Council policy for rates remission on Maori freehold land, or the Tauranga City Council policy for rates remission on Maori freehold land. So Tauranga City and Western Bay share a lot of the same hapu across our district, and so we have been working closely to get consistency and believe that it would be beneficial to the owners of whenua Māori within Aorohi if Regional Council look to achieve consistency with the Western Bay and Tauranga City Council policies, at least at an overarching principle level. So the main point that we just really wanted to emphasize was around the definition of Māori freehold land. So in the proposed policy for rates remission that Regional Council are consulting on, the definition is quite narrow in that it only covers land that has the legal status of Māori freehold land. What both Western Bay and Plenty District Council, and I don't want to speak too much on behalf of TCC because that's not what we're here for, but and Tauranga City Council have as well as looked to adopt a broader definition to better reflect the different tenure that whenua Māori can have. So one of the key inclusions for our district is land that has had its status changed under the Māori Affairs Amendment Act. So I'm not sure whether the councillors are aware, but back in the late 1960s and early 70s, there were large parcels of Māori land that were just arbitrarily had their status changed to general land by the Crown. This was done as an intentional act to alienate Māori land. And so what Western Bay recognises is that some of those parcels who have had their status changed arbitrarily and are now general land are actually still used and owned as if they were whenua Māori. And so we, at our discretion, include those pieces of land within our policy. That's under our operational. We are also currently working through our review of our rates remission on Māori freehold land policy, and what we are proposing and are looking to adopt next month is that we will broaden that definition again to include land that's been returned to Māori by the Crown or by a local authority, so either treaty settlement land, or the kind of prominent example in the Western Bay District is the return of Panipani Pūrākau to the 5 hapu of Matakana and Rangiwaia. So where we're returning land that was taken, whether that was confiscated or purchased, some kind of Public Works Act provision, looking to make sure that when that land is returned to the tangata whenua, that there isn't a big financial burden that comes with that, at least in the first instance. So irrespective of the status, if that land has been returned in recognition of some kind of historical breach, then that will be eligible for rates remission until such time that it's developed. The other sort of 3 points that are more at a higher level are council, because of the way that we structure our policy and definitions of whenua Māori, there are pieces of land that will be eligible under our remissions policy for remission, but may not be eligible under the changes under the Local Government Rating Act. And so what we have done is we've kept apportionments within our policy, which will act in a similar way to separate rating areas, which have been introduced under the changes to the Local Government Rating Act, but so we'll retain apportionments for those pieces of land that don't have that Māori freehold land legal status. The other two are more around the drafting, I think, rather than the actual intention. And that is that within our policy and in our experience in dealing with rates is that we quite often find that a lot of whānau aren't actually aware of their options when it comes to rates remission. And so that can sometimes lead to some hesitancy in actually dealing with council. So we've chosen to just sort of really obviously put in there about the potential for rates write-off that are now included under the Act. So we've just chosen to duplicate that within our policy just for clarity for our ratepayers. And the final point that we'd like to speak to, and sorry, I'm aware I'm probably pushing close to time, is that within the draft policy for rates remission from the Regional Council, there is a general reference for the maximum term for remission for papakainga or other housing slash accommodation. So in our operational policy, we currently have a 5-year maximum. We are looking at removing that rather than introducing something, and that's really just so that it gives staff better discretion to actually assist with our whānau trusts and whānau who are looking to develop their land, so that we can really look at scoping a proposal on a case-by-case basis. So those are the main points that we'd just like to reiterate from our submission. But overall, what we're really hoping for is that Regional Council will consider working with Western Bay and the other council within the Bay of Plenty area to get some consistency across our policy approaches. Kia ora.
Right, thank you very much for your submission and speaking to it. And as one of the requirements from the governance body here was that in terms of these issues that we consulted and worked with our territorial colleagues to see that there was alignment in the places that we could best, because we can't have a whole lot of different operational criteria. So thanks for that. Good to see the constructive commentary that you've got in your submission. Councillor Nees and Councillor Thompson.
Oh, thank you. Great to get an idea of where you're likely to go with your remissions policy for Maori land. We have a challenge in that we have councils right across the road here that have got different policies, and what we've tried to do is pull them all together. But that's not easy when they're all different. But can you clarify for me, have you consulted on your proposed changes? And when they will come into consideration, because it may be something that we have to look at next time we review our policy.
Yeah, so we undertook consultation from the 21st of March through to the 21st of April. And at this stage, we're expecting the policies, including the rates remission on Māori freehold land, along with the other 9 rates relief policies, that we consulted on, to be adopted in June of this year.
Just to build on what Tom said, we did also undertake some pre-engagement with we've got 2 tangata whenua forums, which represent the 2 main hapu groupings or 3 waka within our district. And so we engaged with those tangata whenua forums around the Māori freehold policy specifically.
Right, anything else, councillors? If not, thank you, Tom. Thank you, Corey. Well presented.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, Chief Executive, where to from here? Yeah, but in terms of replying to these submitters, and as an example, I just noted, let me see if I can find it quickly. There was one submitter here that raised an issue regarding rates remission, which I thought. Oh yeah, Helmer Fraser, remissions on land where there is a covenant in place. I would have thought that that applies anyway on application to the territorial authority.
Thank you, Chair. So what we normally do is we respond to all of the submitters individually. We have a large spreadsheet in terms of all of the points you've made and how we'll respond, and we'll get that to councillors. In regards to that point that you've made, I will have to follow up in terms of that, in terms of the remission on covenants.
Okay, so Mr. Winters.
Just for the record, Mr. Chairman, myself, Te Taru, Lyle, and Fiona are meeting Mr. Turner after this meeting separately, so we'll get a good handle on his issues coming forward and we'll report back.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Winters. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, I'd just like some clarification on the implications from the last presentation about rezoning of Maori freehold title into general title. What does that mean in terms of commercial viability, saleability, and the like? I mean, it's a really interesting point of law for me. Can anybody give us a reasonably short answer?
I think as Councillor Nees has indicated, we have sought to be consistent with all the rates remissions policies around the region. We're in a position where one of the councils is changing their rates remission policy, and so we will look at that for your 23-24 policy review. Because we can't, unless you choose to go out and do a special consultation procedure. this is something that will occur in the future in terms of differing rates remissions policies.
Is your question that if it's classed as general land, then it's valued differently? Yeah.
Yeah, I just wondered, I mean, I wasn't aware that there'd been significant quantities of Maori land rezoned in the 60s, and I suppose the social equity around that and the long-term implications and where that's been going. So we just, need to know what I'd like to know anyway. Cheers.
As was shared in the information from Western Bay submitters, it increases the saleability, but at that time it was about also alienation of the land to actually take it out of collective ownership so it becomes saleable. The issue at the moment is it's still there, not sold, but no development. And that goes back to probably the position of capability to develop it. You know, and still will banks loan on it, they'll take mortgage over the land, and Māori don't want to put the land at risk. So that's the point. That's the point of difference right now, I believe.
Right, thank you, councillors. I now want to move to page 9 of your agenda, which is recommendations. So I'll move the recommendations, receive the report, hearing of submissions and statement of proposals. Seconded, councillor White. Any further debate? If not, put the resolution. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you. I declare the meeting closed.
Te tau ke tata koutou te ata whai atu tātou riki a krati me ki aroha te atua me te whiwhinga taitana ki te wairu tapu ake. Amen.
Well done, councillor White.